against women and child abuse. So here on SA Today, we will here and there continue to bring you stories of women who had gone through so much due to violence. So this afternoon, we talked to a lady whom, as a teenager working as a domestic worker in Johannesburg, believed that she was destined for a different path, but had to go through so much to be where she is now. Our guest has written a book that's called The Shadows of My Scars, which details the horrible events of the night of September the 23rd in 2011 when she was beaten and raped. Linda Maponyane is an author, a pastor, and a rape conqueror, and she joins us now in studio to share with us her story as we continue to observe the 16 days of activism against women and child abuse. Good afternoon to you, Linda. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so who is Linda Maponyane before the pastor Linda that we know, the author that Linda is?
Yes.
Take us through your journey of life.
I'm an only child and grew up in like literally 7 households. I moved from one place to the other, but eventually in 2003 I came back to Joburg from Limpopo. And I decided that I'm going to build my own life, my own brand, and become my own woman that does not have to be attached to a particular family where you will eventually be detached. But today, I'm a businesswoman and I am making it and shining.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So as I said on my introduction, yours has certainly not been an easy one. Education is something that's always been very close to your heart. Hence you went back, you came back from Limpopo to Johannesburg to try to do something with your life. But of course, financial circumstances would not allow.
So what happened is when I came back to Joburg in 2003, I had lived with my mom and grandmom a very mediocre life, and I knew that I'm not meant and called for that. And I came back, and I remember when I came back, I actually had no place to go. I didn't know where I was going to sleep. I was at North Street for a good 30 minutes and eventually ended up in Benoni. 2 weeks later, I worked for my mother's former boss, who was as a domestic worker, where my mom was a domestic worker when I was growing up. And about a month later, she organized me a job in City Deep. I went there and I was a tea girl and the cleaner, filing clerk, you know, those things. But in 2005, I decided that I'm going to register for my degree in psychology, and I did. And it took an entire 13 years to achieve it, not necessarily because I am dumb or anything of that sort, but because I was the sole breadwinner at home, and at one stage my grandmother's mud house fell and I had to rebuild it. And I remember it was just difficult to be building this house and at the same time paying for my own UNISA fees. So at one stage I'm not at school, at one stage I'm taking one module, etc., which then led to the delay, but eventually I got the degree.
It eventually happened. And now fast forward to the 23rd of September 2011 when something big happened. Take us through what happened on that day.
So on that day I was coming from church. I'm a pastor. I was coming from church. I had just preached, and I was dropping off one of the church members where she lives. And in no time, like literally within a second, there was a gun on my head, and this guy instructs me to go to the back of my car. I literally had to go there between the passenger seat. I went to the back, and another guy jumped in at the back, and he says to me, I must kneel down and I must put my hands where they can see them. And I did that, and I remember thinking to myself, okay, so is this how it's going to end, you know? And he drove, and when he started driving, I remember him saying, we just want to use your car for something and then we're going to give it back to you. And I had read a book called I Have Life by a rape survivor, and those same words were used, and I knew at that point that he wasn't telling the truth. And I started praying, and I remember in my prayer the Holy Spirit said to me, you are not going to die. And that for me was enough. Whatever that was going to happen afterwards, to me, I was kept by the promise of the whisper that I could feel in my soul that told me that I'm not going to die. And we then got to a ditch. They emptied my car. They took everything that they felt is valuable. They took my shoes, and you know, women in the boot, there were shoes, there was just a whole lot of things. Yes. And they emptied all of it. They took literally everything that you can think of. And and then one took the friend I was with, and then one took me. He beat me up, and then he raped me.
So you say that you have forgiven your attacker by the name of Justice Morake, who's serving 1,535 years in jail as it is now.
Yeah.
The forgiveness part of it, is it something that came naturally, or is it something that you had to learn to achieve throughout? Because part of what you say on the book that you have written, as I quote, I have given you every tear, I have forgiven you, I beg your pardon, for every tear I cried, every ARV I swallowed, every STI medications I stomached, every nightmare I had early after the rape, every fear to sleep in darkness, and every brokenness and bitterness I felt. This quote on its own, it is too deep.
Look, writing that letter, it actually took me months for me to write that letter. And I remember when I wrote it, I was weeping. It wasn't just a, I forgive you. It probably took me hours to finish it, because...
But what was happening in your mind? Were you reliving the events of the 23rd of September 2011?
So what had happened is, as somebody that has a calling upon my life, God had given me a ministry to start called My Womanhood, My Worth, and he had given it to me before the event happened. So when the event happened, just one of these days I'm sitting and I'm hearing the words that says, this is what I meant when I said my womanhood, my worth. You need to establish this organization, and you need to give my girls hope that they can be restored and their womanhood can be restored. And I remember thinking to myself, how am I going to do this? And God gave me one statement, that you need to forgive this guy for me to use you. And writing that letter, I remember I took a pen and a paper and I started writing, and I was asking myself so many questions, and something was dropped in my spirit at that moment, that if I don't forgive this guy, I will allow him to rape me every day. It was at that point where I decided within me that I am going to release him, because I am not ready to be violated on a daily basis. I am not ready to house this man and give him my body every day without permission going forward. And it really helped me to release the bitterness and to just liberate myself. And I'm not going to say that on that day when I put the pen down, I stood up and I was powerful and I was ready for the world. It didn't happen like that. The truth of it is, it took more months and more weeks for me to internalize the truth of it, and to eventually say, I am indeed free from it. But I know, and I can tell you right now, that the truth is, I was fully liberated by me releasing him from me and walking away as Linda, the rape conqueror.
I cannot even begin to imagine the pain, Linda, of having to be raped whilst you were still celibate. The pain that someone had to take it by force, not intentionally. It must have, worsened and made you feel worse and in pain.
You get very angry. You get very bitter. Like you said, the primary question in my mind was, why did I even keep myself only for me to be violated? And when you then come to a point where you realize, Hore, certain things will happen through you, but they are not necessarily about you. They are about other people that are not as strong as you are, that are not that don't have the strength that you have. I mean, in the journey of me having released the book and being where I am today, I can tell you right now that the feedback I'm getting from people saying your book has strengthened me and your book has given me hope and your book has made me to want to become a better person. I read your book and I tell myself that if Linda could survive it, so can I. That on its own said to me, it wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Not just for me, for that 11-year-old that was raped just yesterday by a 73-year-old man. Not for me, but for that one girl who says, I am a product of rape, and today my mother and I don't have a good relationship because when she looks at me, I'm a reminder of what happened. And every single time when I feel drained, when I feel worn out, I think about these people and I say, God, I'm gonna move on. Yeah.
So the next step after writing this book was to meet the perpetrator.
Yeah.
Have you met him?
The idea was to meet
Yeah.
him. I remember speaking to Usis Nomsa, the lady that actually arrested him, and we were trying to make those arrangements. It's a long process because it's all that it's called victim offender dialogue, that whole thing. So it had to involve social workers and so on and so on.
So
and
it
at that
hasn't
time,
happened.
It hasn't happened.
Do you still want to do it, though?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
And
I
what
think
do you think would be the first thing, the first question, your first statement when you see him?
for me, it's not even going to be about the why did you do it, but it would be, I want to give him a seed of restoration for the power he has. He's a very powerful man, but he didn't know how to use his power. He abused it and he redirected it into a direction that it wasn't even supposed to go. So he needs to be told that you are powerful. You can be that which you want to become, but you don't have to exercise your power on vulnerable people. All he needs is a restoration of the mindset. And I can tell you right now that maybe to other people I sound like Haibol and Tomazan, but I can tell you now that if I were to spend about 20 minutes with him, I'd realize that he was a broken man himself. And all he needs is someone to give him hope and a seed of a better life.
Linda, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but I just want to bring in the importance of the days such as your 16 days of activism against women and child abuse in South Africa. Do you see the importance of these days?
I feel that the emphasis is being made in 16 days, and the impact of the pain and the scars that we have to live with, these shadows that I walk with every day, do not take 16 days to remove. And if we are going to invest 16 days in it, and after that it's all gone and it's now left to Bolinda, it's only one Linda with 10 million women that are raped, then we are only trying to get water from the ocean with a teaspoon, and we're not going to get there. Anyway. And I also feel that it's during this time where we are speaking to rape survivors and rape conquerors, but the voices of men who needs to help their brothers to renew their minds is not heard enough. I don't hear them, I don't see them, but I'm only hearing rape survivors and conquerors coming forward and telling their stories. We're going to tell our stories, and after telling our stories, what's next?
True. I mean, we've heard a number of these horrific stories during the gender-based violence summit that was called by the president last year. But the question really is, how do we assist in fighting the scourge of gender-based violence in South Africa? A lot has been done. Women have marched. We've worn black and dukes, and almost everything has been done. But it looks like the status quo is not changing. How do we move forward? How do we get rid of this monster that is killing women and children inside and out?
I think one of the first things that we need to do is try and get morals in those little ones. If we go to the schools and instill these morals from one man, let the brothers, the fathers, the uncles be the ones that will go out there in these schools where these children are and mentor them and find a way to speak to them while they are still young. That seed will never go away. And with the older ones, we can only pray and believe that the voices of their own brothers will be able to recalibrate their thoughts and get them restored and get them to rethink their thinking process of looking at Ulinda and thinking, the this is a product of sex and I can use her and walk away. But what you don't understand is that when you walk away, I never walk away.
Linda, time constraints. Thank you so much for coming through. We wish you everything of the best. Linda Maponyane is an author. She's a businessman. She's written the book that's called Shadows of My Scar. So this is the book that where she details the horrible events on the night of the 23rd of September 2011 when she was raped. So yeah, we'll continue on that theme here on SA Today to reflect on the stories and most importantly to map a way forward on the scourge of gender-based violence facing South Africa.